Hey yo, what up, what up, what up? What's good? What's good, what's good? Shout out to the graveyard shift. Shout out to the overnight crew. Shout out to the ICU, the nurses working the ICUs. Shout out to the people who are the hospice workers in California. Wow, did y'all see that story? Shout out to Dr. Oz. It's funny. I heard about that story and I didn't know nothing about it. I had no idea of that kind of fraud that was going on. Allegedly, we're talking billions of dollars in the hospice. Hospice. So shout out to the people who work in the hospice industry. That's a hard industry, man. You're dealing with a lot of end of life care. You're dealing with a lot of elderly people, who don't have family members. Some of them have family members, but the family member don't want nothing to do with them. Yeah, buddy. That's going on right now. Y'all know I'm telling the truth. But shout out to everybody out there. Shout out to my new listeners. Shout out to the trolls. Please don't hate on my trolls. I love the trolls. They give us views and we like that and they share the video. It's me, it's your man, it's your boy, Alpha the First One. The YouTube channel is called E-Waste Dating Tips by A11. E-Waste Dating Tips by Alpha the First One, or just E-Waste Dating Tips. I'm on multiple platforms. If you type in E-Waste Dating Tips, just that, you're going to find me. Alright? You're going to find me. And to all the new listeners, I am an author. I'm finishing my PhD and my doctor right now. I'm not that far away from it, but I'm not a doctor yet. But I wrote my book as a philosopher. So let me clear that up. My book is a philosophical theory about a dating system that I discovered amongst human beings. All right? I discovered it. It's not something that I created, it's something that I discovered. Much like people discovered the ideal of capitalism, and then people created the theory of communism or socialism or democratic socialism. Well, I discovered two dating systems that we've been doing since we've been on this planet. The first system has no rules and no regulations. I call that system GPS. I use the letter G, P, and S to symbolize what's happening in the system. The letter G stands for genetics. The letter P stands for personality. The letter S stands for security of resources. GPS, unregulated. That's the first system. If you don't regulate human being dating and mating sexual behavior, you say, hey, just go do whatever you want. We don't care what you do. You're going to get a GPS system. Meaning the women are going to choose the men based on genetics, personality, and security of resources in that order every time. Genetics will be first, personality will be second, and security of resources will be last. All right, I want keep that in mind because that's going to go on tonight on what I want to talk about tonight. Now, when you say I'm sick of all this, okay, I'm tired of this. We're not going to be doing this no more. We are sick and tired of how men and women are dating. Specifically, we tired of what women are choosing. We're going to force these women. We're going to regulate these women. We're going to make it law that you got to choose men based on security of resources first. Personality second and genetics be damned. That's the last thing. You are now creating an SPG. SPG, regulated dating and mating system. So the name of my book is the GPS, unregulated, versus SPG, regulated dating and mating system concept. Now, if you naturally thinking, wait a minute, Alpha, You said the first system, there's no rules and regulation. That is correct. So if you was to think, well, Alpha, it seems like the first system is nature's system. Now, if you don't believe in nature, you would say, well, Alpha, that system, that must be from God. If you think in that way, you are correct. That's a good rebuttal argument. You can make the case that if you never regulate dating and mating, if you never put any rules and regulations, you're going to be dating and mating on nature or God's system. Yeah, that's a good idea if you were thinking that way. Now, if you're thinking, well, Alpha, when you start regulating dating and mating, and you start telling people what to do, rules and regulations, essentially you going against nature or you're going against God. Boom. I would tell you that you're right. That's why I say the SPG is man's intervention. It's man's counter to either nature or God. That is a damn good assessment. You right on it, brother, if you thinking that way. See, I got to make this clear because a lot of people, I've been presenting my argument over multiple platforms, as y'all know. I did this over 6 months. I'm not on them anymore now. I've left them alone for 2 months. I'm done with the platforms. Excuse me, I have allergies, and we still got a little bit of spring pollen going on in Southern California. So I apologize if y'all hear me battling my allergies. But we'll get through it. And you might hear me cut my heater on because, we got a little bit of cold left in April, Southern California. That's where I live at, SoCal. Shout out to SoCal. But essentially, a lot of people, when I went on those programs, a lot of people were saying, Alpha, it just seems like, I had one guy ask me this, and this is so interesting. And this is kind of going into the topic tonight. He said, Alpha, it seems like you're saying that in order for us to fix this problem that we're having, essentially, we're going to have to force women to mate, meaning marry, men that they're not attracted to. That's what he said. That's what he asked me. He said, it sounds like that's what you're saying. And everybody got quiet when he said that. And I told him, sir, your assessment is 100% right. Everybody said, what? I said, absolutely. I said, what do you think? And that's when everybody got quiet again. I said, what do y'all really think? I said, y'all think marriage was built on love, finding true love? I said, marriage ain't never been about true love, ever. You can't find it in recorded history. Boom. Everybody got quiet, and I heard a few. Yeah, he right about that. You know how you hear that? Yeah, you're right about that. You know that little fade away, you right? They fade off. They don't want to be seen, but they know you're right. I said, absolutely, sir. I said, that's the problem. We've been sold the Disney lie. And what is the Disney lie? This is the Disney lie. That there's a such thing called a PSG or PGS. What does the letter P stand for? I told you. What does it mean? Personality. See, the Disney lie tells you that the man or the woman will like one another because they got great personalities. Ain't that something? And then the genetics or either security resources will come second. And either one of those, whatever they pick, would be lie. But essentially, personality comes first. That's the Disney lie. So if anybody was thinking, when I told you what the GPS and SPG stood for, if you was thinking, well, why not personality first? Personality doesn't come first because we are biological creatures. We are physical beings, meaning we cannot escape our senses. It's just we can't escape them. Descartes tried to do that. Look up a philosopher called Rene Descartes. He tried to do it. We can't escape what we like physically. We just can't. And physicality is not just visual. There have been numerous studies of blind people. Can't see a lick of the world, and that's unfortunate. And blind women will say, I don't like the way he sound or smell. I ain't dating him. Ain't that something? I don't like the way his voice sound. That's hearing. That's still physical. I don't like the way he smell. And then they would touch the man's facial feature or his chest or his, I don't want to talk to him. If you want a good example of that, look up a movie called Red Dragon. It's basically the spinoff of Anthony Hopkins' Silence of the Lambs. In Red Dragon, there was a guy who was basically a mass murderer. But he had a relationship with a blind woman. And he was born with a cleft lip. Look up the cleft lip. He had the surgery, so you could tell he had the surgery because he had the little line. Almost all the people who have a cleft lip, you can see the line that they have. It's a birth defect. And that basically tainted his personality because he considered himself ugly. And I think he was an orderly at a hospital or something like that. But he was in rather great shape. He was in very good shape. He took care of himself. But the guy was a mass murderer. And I don't want to spoil the movie for you. But essentially, if you look at that movie, Red Dragon, there was a scene in there when his blind girlfriend was touching on his face. And she touched the scar and she didn't care. Because she touched other parts of his face and she touched his cheek and she touched his chest. And she said, I think you're beautiful. I think you're handsome. She said, I feel the scar, but I don't care. I like everything else. You smell great. You sound great. Obviously his personality, she liked it. And she said, I like the other features. I like your eyebrows. She was able to touchy feel him, but she couldn't see him. So the idea of a PSG where men and women will not choose each other based on physicality, right, first, right? And they would go for personality naturally, that's the Disney lie. That's false. Now, why does that matter? Some of you might say, man, you forgot to tell us the topic. I do that on purpose if y'all haven't noticed. I do that on purpose. I'm trying to get you to start thinking. I'm trying to get your critical thinking skills going. Because if I throw out the topic and it's a topic you don't like, you may just skip over and just delete and keep moving. But now that I gave you all that background up front, here's the topic of tonight. And the topic is very simple. What happens to society when average women become delusional? That's the question of tonight. That is the topic. And I think a lot of y'all might be saying, oh, I see what you're saying now. See what I'm saying? I had to give you that Red Dragon story. I had to break down the title of my book. And I had to destroy the Disney lies so you can understand the topic of tonight. That's by design. Now you understand the topic. What happens when average women become delusional to society? What happens? Well, I just defined to you what is the delusion. What is the delusion? The Disney lie. The Disney lie that they're going to pick guys because of some personal trait. No, it doesn't happen like that. It's never going to happen. So that's the first delusional thing that I have to destroy. What's the second delusional thing? And this is a big one. This is huge. That they're going to choose men based on money first, naturally. Boom. That is the key tonight. What did I tell you the name of my book was? The GPS. That is natural, that is nature or God's dating and mating system. Which means what? The women are going to choose mates based on genetics first. Not security of resources, which is money. Not security of resources, which is your job or your title in society or your status. You're the mayor, you're the president, you're the pastor. We already know about the pastors. All right? They are going to choose genetics first when they have the freedom to do so. That's what they're naturally programmed to do. So that's the second thing to tell you what happens when they do that. What happens to society when they go with the GPS system? Well, the answer's in the question. They become delusional. Why am I saying this? Because we have a lot of women in one generation right now that's coming off the delusional train. Okay? And what generation of women is that? It is the millennials. Cutting on my heater, y'all might hear it. Yeah, the generation Y, the largest generation right now, I'm a millennial, 80s baby. We have a generation of women who are now being kicked off the delusional train. They're off. They're done. The train is now carrying mostly what? Generation Z. The boomer women and the Gen X, they've been off they're gone. I mean, they're not even at the train station. But what's at the train station right now is a lot of Generation Y women who've been on the delusional train. They essentially have been on what? The GPS dating system. That's what they've been doing. They've been choosing what? Genetics first. All millennials are now early 40s. All of us are in our early 40s. Mid to early 40s. That's where we are. And all millennial women now are age 30 and older. That is true. So essentially, you have a lot of 30 and older women, right? And women who are early 40s. And they at the train station doing what? Looking for a man. Ain't no men there though. And so essentially, you got a lot of delusional women. And what have they been doing for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years? They've been chasing what? Genetics first. As I've told y'all, and I've never lied to y'all about this, I am literally the 666 man. I mean, I'm not 6'6", I'm 6'9", if you know what I'm saying. I'll leave it at that. Try to keep it respectable. But yeah, I am 6 feet tall. I have the 6-figure income, and I'm definitely 9 something down below. I've never hit that with anybody on this channel. I've never tried to trauma bond with y'all. I did a video called Trauma Bonding. Look it up. I'm not trying to trauma bond with y'all. Why am I saying that? Because the delusional women in our society right now have got off the train. And so now they're forced They are forced to look at something that they genuinely don't want, which is what? Security of resources. See, that's the beauty of the two systems. See, the GPS, they chase genetics, personality, security, resources in that order in their prime years. When they get 27 and older, we all know this, the wall, they switch to what? They want the need, the security resources. So they try to switch to an SPG, but it's not authentic. See, it's only enough to secure the security, but they go right back to the GPS that's naturally programmed in them. In order to keep them on the SPG, there has to be what? Man's intervention. That is why you're seeing the high divorce rates, right? And that is why you're seeing the high divorce rate, even higher divorce rate among educated women. Look that up. Because once they secure the quote-unquote security of resources, right? Once they lock that down and they say, well, I got it. I mean, I don't need it no more now. They going back to the streets. That's why they only stand in marriages, what, an average of 3 to 5 years now. Look it up. But what is going to happen to society if this continues on? Well, you're seeing the results right now. We've always talked about those results. High divorce, children out of wedlock, low birth rates, blah, 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 blah. Now, why am I talking about this subject? Because it goes back to that question that I was asked on that podcast. When the guy asked me, he say, Alpha, essentially, what you're saying is that in order for us to fix this problem, we have to force average women. He didn't say average women, but I'm saying average women. He said we have to force women to be with men that they're not attracted to. Let me translate that for you. We have to force average women to be with average men. Boom. Yes, we have to do it. Now, when do we do it? That's the problem. See, if you allow them to do it, they're going to do it when? Over the age of 27. Now I'll take a look at the average guy. Okay, come on, average guys. Come on, nice guys. Come on, provider males. Come on, husband material. Come on to all the guys that I rejected in my prime. I have all the time in the world for you now. Shout out to Coach Greg Adam. It's the famous video, and that's you. That's it. That's you, gentlemen. Come line up. I'm ready to sell you what? A bad deal. A lot of people don't like when I say that part, that it's a bad deal, because they're trying to frame it as it's not a bad deal. I heard some guy he was a panda bear, trying to say, well, the woman has went out and lived their life, so now she's more focused on those things. So that's a pretty good deal for a man, you know. He's now got a woman who's focused, and she's going to be ready to do more of the, family type of setting environment. That's stability. That's what he's looking for, right? And one guy heard him say it. He said, yeah, but she's doing it at 30-something years old. We got 30, 40, 50-year-old women. Now they're ready to settle down. That's a bad deal for the man and for society. Why? You already know why. I just told you the reasons why. So, not to go on this long tangent on all the negative outcomes, just think about this pragmatically. From a pragmatic truth standpoint, I wrote that in my book. I don't want y'all to get bogged down with statistics and charts and graphs. I just want you to take a step back, rub your belly and scratch your head, and just think about this for a second. You have a woman who's been dating and mating for almost 20 to 25 years. Depends on when she started. I don't advocate for PDF, but we all know we got women starting as early as age 10 with other teenager minors. I'm not talking about them being raped by an adult. That's why there's something called Romeo-Juliet laws. Look them up. So please don't say Alpha's advocating for PDF. I detest it. I don't support it. I'm talking about minors engaging in sexual activity. We know they're doing it, and a lot of you listening to me, you did it too. You were a minor engaging with sexual activity with another minor. I'm not advocating for any adults doing that with a minor. I never will support that. If you've done that, you need to leave my channel. But if you are quote unquote 17, 16, 15, 14, 13, we got it as early as 10, and we got them engaging with one. We call it teenage, puppy love, Romeo, Juliet, whatever you want to do it. They're doing sexual activity. Let's just be adults about that. So you take those years, and then you add the 18 to the point where she stopped years, you got about 15 to 20 years of sexual activity from a woman. Now, why do I put emphasis on the woman? Because that's another thing people say. Why does it start with the woman? Because we're not supposed to be forcing them, right? See, in the GPS, there's no rules, there's no regulation. And we're not advocating for men forcing themselves on women, right? So if we don't advocate for men to force themselves physically on women, which I support, the choice is going to be driven by who? Women. It's still mutual because men have to say, yeah, I like her back. But essentially, if the man says, it's mutual both ways. Don't get me wrong. The man has to like the woman and the woman has to like the man. But this is the problem with people when they try to dilute that situation. The problem is that what? They think that men and women are equal. And the reality is we are not equal. Which means the way men select women for mates is not equal to the way women select men for mates. So I'm not going to waste time trying to defeat the so-called equalist because the equalist is already defeated. A person who's an equalist that think the sexes are equal, you are already defeated. You are living a lie and you know that. I don't need to defend the quote-unquote statement of the truth that men and women are not equal. You have to defend your false reality that we are, and you cannot. The evidence of the last 70 years has proven that the equalist is the false person in the room. That's why you see all the feminists and equalist men running from conversation now. Have you noticed that? A lot of them running. They don't have nothing to say because they know They can't do that anymore. Before they were, oh, we didn't know. Well, women would do what men do and men would do what women do. We tried all that for 70 years. It failed. It does not work. Men and women are different. Men and women are not the same. Men and women are not equal. And that's not bad. Boom. So the mate selection, when we're not forcing ourselves, is going to come from the women first. That's just the way it goes. And this can be observed throughout the entire wild. Multiple animals. There are some animals where the males are very choosy and selective, but we all know the majority of the dominant predators, apex predators, and apex herbivores, and large animals that's closely resembled to us, the females choose the mates and the men go along with it out of what? Mutual consent. So they don't force. You understand? So we got a generation of women, Generation Y. They've been on the GPS, no rules and regulations, and they have become delusional. That's why we got a lot of them that ain't going to make it. Look up the Morgan Stanley. I don't need to talk about that. I've already talked about that. What what is the delusion? That's the question. In order for you to answer that question, what happens to society, you have to understand what is the delusion that they get. Well, the delusion that they get, and it's real simple, they think they all got a shot with their ideal top man. And that could be anything. Notice I didn't say it's one particular movie star or one particular height or one particular color. Because if you put 100 women in a room and ask them what's their ideal mate, I guarantee you're going to probably have 101 ideas of what they consider the top man. And if you try to narrow it down to try to get them to congregate around something, you probably come up with maybe 10 men. And if you take those 10 men and congregate them down, you might can get it down to 3 or 5. Let's just be honest about that. All right, meaning they might have to grind their teeth and say, yeah, I'll take him, but it's not their eye. You get what I'm saying? They'll say, yeah, he's there, but it's like what they do with the People's Magazine. You know how every year they put out and they say, oh, this is the world's sexiest man. And that has been young men, old men, middle-aged, really super old men. I mean, and there's always some woman saying, well, he ain't sexy to me, but I guess so. I mean, I guess he is kind of attractive. See what I'm saying? That's how they are. So essentially, the delusion comes from that average woman thinking she can get her so-called ideal man. And studies and research and just 7 years of failure have showed that most of them can't do it. And this is the key part right here. The reason why they can't do it is because usually their ideal top man is usually 10 other women version of the same ideal top man. Do you understand what I'm saying? I just told you all of them ain't going to agree. But they'll say, I guess so, so be it. And they'll flock to that man. That's just what they naturally do. So they'll hover around the so-called top man that's genetically fit, not security of resources. See, People Magazine don't put out the top man because of his security of resources. They put that top man out for what? His genetics, period. That's it. They'll say a little bit about his personality, but they don't really push into all the. I mean, obviously, it's going to be a movie star or some famous CEO or maybe even a congressman. You get it? But they're not propping the guy up for what he does. They propping him up for how he looks. Let's just call it what it is. And so all the women will naturally congregate around this one man or a few men, because it's going to be a few men. And they all think they got a shot. That's the delusion. That is the delusion right there. And they know it. Women are not stupid about this. Not like they don't know this. There are a lot of women who look in the mirror and say, I'm not the best looking woman in the world. It is what it is. Some women do that. Men do it too. Everybody does that. But when you have a society that tells everybody there's no such thing as an ugly, every woman is beautiful. They're all princesses. They're all Cinderellas. That's the Disney lie. That is the delusion. And so what happens to society is you now have a bunch of women who are clearly delusional, and they delude themselves, by the way. They delude themselves. Then when reality hit and they know they can't get this top guy for themselves, they either accept the reality that they're going to have to share him. Do I even need to explain that that does happen? Does anybody have any doubts about that at this point? Come on. You say that 20 years ago, people look at you crazy. Now you say, yeah, women will share men. People get quiet because they know you're telling the truth. Yeah, they'll share a man. Absolutely. Volunteer. And a man could be broke. Do I even need to talk about that? They're sharing him based on what? His genetics and his personality. That's it. Man might be broke, ain't got a dime to his name. But they don't care. That's what they naturally do. But once reality kick in and the delusion ideal window or whatever glasses come off, then they do what? They say what? Well, I know I'm not going to get this man to myself. And it was fun chasing him, no doubt about it. Might even had a chance to sleep with him. We know that's happening. But I got to get in the real world now. I got to find somebody who's not my ideal man. I got to be real now. I can't be delusional no more. And I'm getting older. Now the safe provider, nice, good guy, now he'll do. Now see, with the boomer generation and some of the Gen Xers, when they made that switch, it wasn't that bad for society because there was a lot of men that did what? They took that deal. There was a lot of men who took that deal. When those women came out of the delusion and they finally got back into the real world, a lot of men was there were boomers and Gen Xers, earlier Gen Xers, not the middle to younger Gen Xers. We're talking about the older Gen Xers. The older Gen Xers are very close to the boomers. All right? The older Gen Xers and the boomer generation, there was a lot of men who took that deal. They did. They took it. And so essentially, for society, at first it looked like things would work out. Yeah, this is what everyone, if you look at it, go study the data, you can see the divorces going up and the marriage rate going down by the generations. And it wasn't really known until about the mid first 2000s, like '05 on down to now. That's when people said, wait a minute, something ain't looking right. We're not getting these marriages like we was before. We're not getting these babies like we had before. What's going on? That's what I want you to see here. See, the boomer women, when they came out of the delusion, and the Gen X women came out of the delusion, they had a large population of men ready to take the deal. So for society, it looked like everything was going to work out. It did look like that. But about that mid 2000, first 2000, that's when people say, uh-oh, something ain't looking right. That's when society said, something's not looking right. And now you see from the mid 2000s to now where society is right now. What happens to society when average women become delusional? What happens is, and this is what happens, average men don't want those women. Boom. See, at first it looked like the average men would do it because those were the average boomer men and the average older Gen X men. The middle Gen X men on down, all of Gen Y and now average Gen Z, all those average men have rejected that deal from the delusional average women. See, I had to show you all of it for you to understand why this is happening to society. And they don't know what to do about it. See, they needed a large population of men to make it work. A large population of what? Average men. That large population of average men started shrinking in Gen X. And now the millennial women are at the train station looking for those average men. But those average men are not there. They're not coming. Now, you might say, Alpha, well, why is it that the average men don't want the delusional average women? It's because the men before them took that deal and they told the men after them, don't take that deal. Yes, the boomer men, average men, and the older Gen X men, average men, who took that deal once they went through that bad deal, they told the younger Gen Xers and the millennials, now Gen Z, don't go to the train station. Okay? Do not go to that train station and do not pick up any passengers off the delusional train. Boom. That's what's happening to society right now. See, the average men can never have a time of being delusional. Notice what I said. That delusional train is carrying what? Delusional women. It ain't carrying no delusional men. Because the top guys are the ones driving the train, and they know the whole time those women ain't never gonna get them for themselves. Boom. And see, they used to blame the top guy who's driving the train, the operator. They used to blame him. Well, that top guy who was driving the train, he wouldn't let me off the train. He didn't let me off at 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 20. He didn't let me off. That's why I stayed on the train so long. No, no, no. That's not working anymore. So what happens to society is now, what I talked about before, is the paradigm. That in this society, we want to give women sexual agency. We want to give them total free sexual agency. But we don't like the results of what they do with it. That's what I told the guy on the podcast when he asked that question. Are you saying we gotta force women, he didn't say average, but women, to be with men they're unattracted to? I said yes, but it cannot be when the women ready to do it. It has to be when the women don't want to do it. Which is what? When they're in their prime. Boom. Now, a lot of you going to say, well, why is that, Alpha? Why do we have to force them to get married in their prime versus in their decline? Because the men are not going to want the women in their decline. Boom. And see, the paradigm is these are average women. Have you ever heard the statement or the phrase in a movie where the man would say, she ain't no beauty queen, but she's a good woman, she'll do? That statement was made big time in the 50s, 60s, 40s, you know that, before the sexual revolution. Why? Because the women were expected to be what? Virgin brides. She ain't no beauty queen, but she's a good woman. She's a good girl. Translation, she ain't no beauty queen, but at least I'm getting a virgin bride. Boom. It is a pickle. I'm only here to explain the systems that I discovered. Yes. And for the people who doubt me, here's my challenge. As I told him on that podcast, if you can solve this problem without reducing women's sexual agency, sign me up. Tell me how you gonna do it. I'll be the first one to come in your system or society. See, that's the challenge. Right now, there's no rules and regulations. They have full, free, total sexual agency. They can choose whoever they want for whatever they want. And you are seeing the results. Yes. Society right now is measuring the cost of women's sexual agency. Boom. There's a lot of booms in this one. I got to get the sound effect, but y'all think y'all get what I'm saying. That's what happens in societies when average women become delusional. When average women become delusional in society, the men don't want those women. That leads to society breakdown. I couldn't make that statement in 2000 because there was still a lot of men taking a bad deal. But it was still trending down. About the mid 2000s, right around that time, that's when everybody started seeing it. That's when everybody said, oh shit, why are people not getting married anymore? Why are people not having children anymore? Why do we have all these women running around here doing all the stuff they doing? And why is that the men don't want them? They tried to blame it on the recession. Remember that? It's the recession. That's what it is. Then they try to blame it on inflation. Then COVID. Now the new Iran war. Crap. That's over. No, the reason why this is happening is because average women have become delusional and average men have never become delusional. They are unable to become delusional. And they don't want those women. Because they know if they take those women, they're going to get a bad deal, just like the boomer men did and the older Gen Xers. So when someone asks you, what happens to society when average women become delusional? The correct answer is, when average women become delusional in society, average men don't want those women. And that is the beginning of society breaking down. That's where we are right now in 2026. And I've said this and I'm going to keep saying it. The Generation Y, my generation, millennial women, will be the first generation of women to face a social penalty from the men for being essentially unfit for the institution of marriage. They won't get married, and a lot of them won't even have children. Because the average men don't want to be with delusional average women. That's what we know now. It can't be denied. This is undeniable. Everyone's trying to find a way to get out of it, but there's no way out of it. As I keep telling y'all, you can't force men to buy overpriced used cars. Boom. And that's what these women are saying at the train station. Force these men to marry non-virgin brides. Essentially, let's do shotgun weddings for non-virgin brides. That's not going to happen. So what is the solution? Well, y'all already know what I say. Regulation is the solution. We know that. But it's also the problem. Why? Because nobody wants to do it. They don't have the backbone to do it. It would fix this problem, but and we just keep going over. You see what I'm saying? It's never going to stop. I'm trying to answer whys on this YouTube channel. I'm trying to give you the systematic and philosophical reason why these things are happening and why you're going to see more of it happening as we go forward. And I don't want people wasting time with things that are going to have no effect on this system. The only way you change an unregulated system is to do what? You have to start regulating dating and mating. Sexual behavior at the beginning. Not in the middle, and damn sure not at the end. So that's it, y'all. That has been the show for tonight. I wanted to get that out because a lot of people have been asking what will happen to society. What will happen to society if we have a bunch of average delusional women, delusional average women? What will happen is the average men will reject those women, and you will start to see the beginning of society falling apart. I don't know how much longer we can do. I'm not a doomer. The U.S. government is fairly strong. I'll give you that. But essentially, they're going to have to address this issue. The men ain't at the train station, and I can't get them back there. Neither can you. The only way you're going to get them back to the train station is to not let women get on the next one leaving out. I'm going to say that again. The only way you're going to get men at the train station is to stop the women from getting on the delusional train before it goes out. Yeah, you got to bring back virgin brides. In order to do that, you got to do regulation. In order to do that, you got to limit women's sexual agency. Will any of that happen? Don't hold your breath. All right, y'all. I got to get out of here. Shout out to the night shift. Shout out to the overtime crew. Shout out to all my trolls. And for everybody else, peace.